The coronavirus has spread to countries across the world, but officials believe that it all started in Wuhan, China.
新冠病毒是美国制造的，是中央情报局创造的生物武器。
There are now more than 126,000 cases across more than 100 countries.
目前，美国一些被认为是死于流感的病例
是否实际上可能死于感染新冠病毒？
I watch CNN, I watch Fox, I watch CBS, and in this case there's a lot of things not being said.
It almost certainly is a recombination event that was laboratory driven.
This is just the essential nature of Chinese communism. Chinese communism is evil.
Every person it harms is directly attributable to the Chinese Communist Party.
Certainly the Lancet paper showing that supposed patient zero was nowhere near the market. Secondly, that there are no bats in the seafood market or anywhere close. The idea of the spread so fast through a population, just the way it was said through the seafood market, is highly unlikely and improbable.
On January 29th, The Lancet republished an analysis of 99 confirmed cases at Jinyintan Hospital, of which 50 had no history of exposure to the seafood market. According to the New England Journal, of the 425 cases confirmed, 45 cases onset before January 1st had no history of exposure to the seafood market. Notably, the authors of the two Lancet papers in the New England Journal of Medicine are doctors and medical experts in mainland China. Daniel Lucy, an epidemiologist at the University of Georgetown, said in response to the Lancet paper that if the data were accurate, the first case would have been infected by the virus already in November 2019, because of the incubation period between infection and symptoms. This would mean that the virus was quietly spreading between people in some parts of Wuhan before the cluster of cases with a history of exposure to Huanan seafood market began on December 15. The first expert group from the National Health Commission arrived in Wuhan as early as December 31st, 2019. The expert panel established a set of diagnostic criteria after investigating Jinyintan Hospital of Wuhan that stipulated a history of contact with Huanan seafood market, the person having a fever, and displaying the whole genome sequence. All three standards have to be met to confirm a case. This standard was used until a second group of experts, including Zhang Nanshan, arrived in Wuhan on January 18th and made a revision. Why did the panel impose a history of seafood market exposure as a criteria of diagnosis, knowing that at least a third of the cases were unrelated to the seafood market?
They clearly know about 14 patients not related to Huanan seafood market at all. That clearly means another source of outbreak. I think somehow this could be a malfeasance or somewhat intentionally cover up some important source of infection.
It can go a long way to covering up the actual source by imposing a false place and you're not looking at the actual victims. Then you're only allowed to find your keys under the light post.
The numbers that we're getting from China about new infections and deaths are highly suspicious. We know that Beijing, for 6 weeks in December and January, suppressed information of the epidemic. And then when they officially acknowledged it on January 20, they then started a campaign of suppression of information. We know that because the central leading group that was announced on January 26 has a 9-person roster, and it's very heavy with propaganda officials. Indeed, the vice chairman of the group is the Communist Party's propaganda czar. It appears that the party's main goal here is suppression of information, controlling the narrative. That's more important to them than actually ending the epidemic.
I was in China when SARS happened, and we were evacuated, and it's the same, it was the exact same thing. There's no transparency. They tried as long as they could to cover it up until finally it was just like with the coronavirus, they could no longer cover it up, and then they proceeded to act. I mean, I think from my perception back then, their response to it is exactly the same.
The coronavirus has spread to countries across the world, but officials believe that it all started in Wuhan, China.
新冠病毒是美国制造的，是中。
And I saw you on Sunday Morning Futures, you pointed out that the World Health Organization put out a tweet on January 14th saying that there's no human-to-human transmission of this disease. That's why President Trump is taking aim at the World Health Organization, saying that we're not going to give them the money, perhaps, that we normally do. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. It's even worse than that. The Free Republic of China in Taiwan notified the World Health Organization on January 31st of 2019 they could prove human-to-human transmission on mainland China. And the World Health Organization looked the other way and believed the Chinese Communist Party. President Trump's 100% right to go after the World Health Organization. That's really been a front organization for the Chinese Communist Party in this entire endeavor. However, that's got to be dealt with. But the Chinese Communist Party and their culpability in this is really what has to be addressed.
Yeah, how will that be addressed? I mean, Steve, you and I talked on Sunday about the fact that they cornered the market for protective equipment in January while they were downplaying the coronavirus. They actually acquired 2.02 billion masks, 25 million pieces of protective clothing. They already make half of the capacity of all masks in the world. Why did they need to buy another 2 billion in January while they were playing down the coronavirus?
Not just playing in, they were lying to people about the human-to-human transmission. They knew they had it. They vacuumed up all the PPE, protective equipment, in Europe, the United States, and Brazil. So later on, they could use it as a strategic advantage to give back to countries to kind of bleed it out like they did with Governor Cuomo. It's unacceptable. This will be proven, and this shows you it's premeditated murder of those doctors and nurses from Italy to South Africa to the United States that died in service to their fellow citizens in their country. The blood is on the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, here's what the president said last night to Sean Hannity about the World Health Organization. I want to get your take. Watch.
Every step that they made, everything that they said was wrong, and always in favor of China. Keep it open. Don't close the borders. There were other things, too, where it came from, the extent of it, how serious it was. They never viewed it as that serious.
Because you know the World Health Organization has spread many lies, including China's lie that coronavirus couldn't transmit person to person, that the virus was under control, that travel restrictions were just racism. In fact, you could argue that coronavirus might have been slowed or stopped by now if the World Health Organization wasn't so incompetent. At times, it seems like they're doing whatever they can to keep it spreading. Senator Rick Scott represents the state of Florida. He'd like to investigate the World Health Organization for what it's done in response to this pandemic. Senator, thanks so much for coming on tonight. Tell us why you believe the World Health Organization is in part culpable for this disaster.
Well, first off, they just work for China, communist China. First, they said on January 14th in a tweet that there was no evidence that there was human-to-human transmission. Lie. Then they said, like I think on the 20th or something, China's doing a great job. Lie. I asked them, and then when Trump did the right thing by doing the travel ban, they attacked Trump for doing the wrong thing. I asked them to do an investigation of China back in February. I started talking about this like you did back in January. Did they ever do it? No. If they had done their job, everybody would have gotten more ready. We wouldn't have shut down this economy, and we wouldn't have all these people dead all over the world. So I want an investigation. I'm on Homeland Security. I've talked to the chairman, Ron Johnson. He's agreed to do it. We're going to investigate why did they do what they did, what was their purpose, and why are we, as American taxpayers, giving them some of our dollars?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Gates, who is the single largest donor, I think he gives more than anybody other than the United States to the World Health Organization, is out there this week saying the lockdown needs to continue indefinitely. Why are the people affiliated with the World Health Organization still treated as serious people when so many of them are liars and buffoons?
Well, first off, one thing, we should never, ever buy one more product from China. When you buy a product from China, you have to say, that's the group of people all right, that completely lied to us and forced us to shut down our economy and killed American citizens and Italian and Spaniards, on top of stealing all of our jobs before. They lie, and the WHO has been right up there with them, helping them. They've parroted whatever Communist China said.
The coronavirus has spread to countries across the world, but officials believe that it all started in Wuhan, China.
新冠病毒是美国制造的。
Gates, the Gates Foundation, are in favor of developing digital certificates that would certify that individuals, American citizens, have an immunity to this virus and potentially other viruses going forward, to then facilitate travel and work and so forth. What are your thoughts from a civil libertarian point of view about these types of what some would say tracking mechanisms that would be adopted going forward to reopen our broader economy?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the slippery slope in terms of continuing encroachments on personal liberty. I do think during the emergency, appropriate, reasonable steps are fine.
But a digital certificate to show who has recovered or been tested recently, or when we have a vaccine who has of people who've received it. That's his answer on Reddit, Ask Me Anything. They had a little forum.
I'd be a little concerned about that, and the tracking of people and so forth, generally, especially going forward over a long period of time.
The coronavirus has spread to countries across the world, but officials believe that it all started in Wuhan, China.
新冠病毒是美国制造的，是中央情报局创造的生物武器。
Good for the northern hemisphere if the force of infection goes down as we get into spring and summer, and give us some time to get both the drugs and advance the vaccine. It is fair to say things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world. And so, the best people at the foundation who are all about high volume vaccines, are working with many manufacturers, not only on the safety and efficacy, but getting that billions of dose capacity. And so, like China, there'll be a partial opening up, which some jobs will resume, school will resume, but we'll have to be very, very careful not to have the rebound until the vaccine comes.